Hello, I'm Dave.
And I'm Jacob.
And yes, the cat's out of the bag. Valve is releasing 3 new bits of hardware, which is a very exciting time to be alive for PC gamers. So we've got the Steam Frame, the Steam Machine, and the new Steam controller. And our Jacob, a couple of weeks ago, was out there in Bellevue itself.
So I've given them all a go. So I guess we have loads of specs. I've got loads of stuff on my laptop here.
Yeah, let's talk about the Steam Frame. Let's go with that. Obviously, Valve came out with the Steam Index in 2019, so we're like 6 years later. It's a Valve Index, sorry.
I know.
That was in like 2019. So is this the Index 2?
No. Very specifically, okay. Not the Index 2. They were very clear. The reason they're calling it the Steam Frame is it is not the Index 2. First off, it's a standalone VR headset. So it has a processor inside it, has a system on chip, an ARM system on chip, and this can actually play games itself. It can run its own OS, and it's running SteamOS. And yeah, it can run games all on the headset without a separate PC. So completely unlike the Index in that sense.
So this is a bit more like a Quest 3 type thing.
It is kind of in that sense. It is ultimately made for streaming. And when they say streaming, they're not saying streaming like streaming on Twitch or cloud streaming. What they mean is you have a host PC, like you would for, say, the Index, and you're playing a game on the host PC, and then it's getting streamed over to the Steam Frame, and then you're playing that game rendered on your local PC, streamed to the VR headset, and you're playing on that.
So how's that going to work? Because obviously you're going to have to use like a big hefty router or something like that. Like how are they handling the Wi-Fi stuff?
Yeah, so this is one of the kind of really interesting bits about the Steam Frame actually, is they're including, I think they call it a wireless adapter. And this wireless adapter is a dedicated 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi 6E connection. And so you plug that in USB to your kind of desktop PC or whatever you're using to stream to the Steam Frame. And then you play the game on there. It gets beamed over this dedicated connection. And then the Steam Frame has antenna on it built to, exactly connect to that proprietary connection. And then it will beam the game over, it'll play it onto the Steam Frame without rendering anything locally, which improves battery life, so you can get pretty good battery life of it because it's not rendering locally. It's also wire-free, and I think this was the one thing that I took away from my actual playtime with the Steam Frame. The complete lack of wires really does feel quite like revolutionary. You can play VR without wires now, but for me personally, I kind of end up playing the Quest 3 connected up with a big cable to my PC because I'm still using Steam VR. Getting rid of that cable for me and for anyone else that's been using a cable for VR, I think is going to be a really big change of pace. So the tracking on the Steam Frame is inside-out tracking. So again, like the Quest 3.
Okay, so no base stations like the Index.
Yeah, you don't have the Lighthouse base station system. I love inside-out tracking. The Quest 3 is really good, and the Steam Frame seemed really, really good and accurate. I think it's got 4 mono cameras on the front of the faceplate, and these basically track your surroundings using computer vision. And then it also has these, I believe they're called IR illuminators, which can be used for dark environments to capture your surroundings. So one of the benefits of having the Lighthouse base station that you had with the Valve Index was that you could use it in pitch black because it's using infrared, and it could track you. And I don't know why you'd be playing VR completely in the dark, but each to their own. So you can, with this, actually still continue to do that, even though you're doing inside-out tracking. We've got the 4 monochrome cameras on the faceplate, but you also have 2 cameras actually inside facing your eyes. These are for eye tracking, which is kind of a popular thing with VR, especially on modern headsets. But these are being used for something, quite an interesting thing involving the game streaming.
Okay.
So when you're streaming from your local PC to the Steam Frame, they're sending a signal that's slightly reduced around the edges where you're not looking.
So it's sort of like lowering the bandwidth around where you're looking.
So when you're foveated rendering, when you're looking and it's so basically it's the center of your eye, you're rendering that a kind of full at the full rate, and then you're doing a reduced rate around the edges where your eye, the part of your vision that can't quite see, your peripheral vision, that bit's being rendered low because you can't see the detail anyway, so you might as well save the kind of processing power.
Yeah.
This is like that, but it's foveated streaming. What they're doing is they're still rendering it the full kind of resolution out on the local PC, but when they're beaming it over using that wireless adapter, they're doing foveated streaming, so that where your eyes are looking, they're only sending the information to render the actual center of your vision. So it saves like a massive amount of bandwidth, basically, which allows them to do, because it supports resolution 72 hertz up to 120 hertz refresh rate with the same 144 hertz experimental refresh rate that the Valve Index supported.
Obviously, we're talking about the Quest 3 as a comparative thing. Like, what are we looking at in terms of like what's the resolution per eye, and what sort of like lenses is it using?
We are using 2160 by 2160 resolution per eye. So there's two screens, LCD screens. It's not micro OLED or anything, extremely fancy like the Apple Vision Pro. For comparison, the Quest 3 is 2064 by 2208. So you're kind of you're above and below the Quest 3, but it's practically
about the same. Yeah.
Refresh rate 72, 90, 120 hertz with a 144 hertz experimental mode. And then the optics, you've got pancake lenses like the Quest 3. You're seeing that reduction in the kind of depth of the lens of the optics system. So instead of having, I think if anyone's familiar with the Valve Index, they'll know that you have these.
Yeah, it was a bulky thing.
Yeah, or any first gen kind of first wave VR headsets for quite a while, they stuck out your face by quite a large distance. And because the lenses are quite tall, right? If you actually took them out, they're fairly big. Pancake lenses, they're much, much thinner, which actually has the benefit of allowing edge-to-edge kind of clarity. It's also just much smaller. So the whole headset itself, I think maybe 2-3 inches away from your face, and fairly well balanced as well.
Yeah, so what does it feel like actually wearing it? Because you've had to play around with this.
So the strap essentially is connected up with a proprietary connector into the small, I think they call it the core module, which is the front. The core module has the optics, has a processor, which we can chat about, and it has the cooling for everything like that. And then the actual power comes from a battery bank on the back of the strap. So you kind of end up with a fairly balanced headset on your head. So it doesn't feel that hefty. I didn't wear it for an extremely long time to get a sort of sense of the fatigue that you might get with, you always get with pretty much any VR headset after wearing them for a while, but it definitely doesn't weigh on the face as much as other VR headsets, I do have the weights here actually. So the core module, just that front bit, it's 190 grams. So that's the processor, the optics, the cooling, all the cameras on the front there, 190 grams.
See, that's really impressive because that's lighter than like a lot of gaming headsets would be, like as in like audio headsets.
Yeah, it's kind of wildly light. And then the whole thing together with the head strap, which includes speakers on the back, and we can chat about those in a sec, but you got that rear battery on the back, and that is 435 grams, which is, I think, something like 30 grams lower than a Quest 3. Just for the record, it's a 21.6 watt hour battery in the Steam frame. For comparison again, the Quest 3 is 19.44. So again, it's pretty similar. The speaker system, it's got dual drivers on either side. And again, they have like a technical reason for this. They have an IMU which detects motion within the Steam frame. It could be affected by loud audio and like bassy audio. In a very Valve fashion, have developed this new speaker system. So 2 drivers per side, which kind of are on the back, towards the back of the strap and then face your ears. Kind of still give that kind of effect of, that effect. It's open, it's expansive, it's a bit more fitting of kind of VR. By having these 2 on either side, they kind of move in opposite directions and they counter each other out so that they don't create vibrations which would affect the IMU and therefore knock off the tracking that the headset relies on. So in theory, the tracking should be good and the audio should be good and there should be no interference between the two.
With each other. Okay, cool. You're saying that Valve is suggesting this is more of a streaming device, which I guess is why they've gone for an ARM chip rather than an x86 chip as the actual processor for this then. So this is more of a like PC connected device. Can it be used standalone?
Yeah.
Is that something that they're aiming at?
Yeah, so I mean, like standalone is obviously a big part of this, I think, because for Valve, that's a completely new frontier, I guess, in terms of VR. They were very keen to point out this is not an accessory for a PC. It is a PC in itself, and it's a Linux-powered PC running on ARM using SteamOS. And SteamOS at the moment, it doesn't support ARM, so that's actually coming out alongside the Steam frame as they put SteamOS on ARM. And yeah, so you can run a game through SteamOS. Even if the game is, say, developed for Windows and x86, you can potentially play that game on the Steam frame. They're using Proton to do the whole Windows to Linux conversion, which works very well for the Steam Deck. It's the same thing that Steam Deck uses. And that's worked great. And I think everyone would say that's generally been a huge success. So off the back of that, they're also using FEX. And FEX is a conversion, another kind of conversion layer in software that essentially converts the x86 to work on ARM. So you've got that Windows to Linux conversion happening, and then you've got the x86 to ARM conversion happening, and all of that happens in the background.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be seamless.
Yeah, so I asked them about that as to whether, how many games can you play using effects and how many games does that work with. They seem really positive about how many it is. They didn't want to say how many it was because they also said it's changing all the time and they're constantly bringing more games to it. So they didn't want to put a limit on it. And I did ask them about like sort of the performance impact you'd maybe see on that. And they did say there is one at this point. They don't really want to put like an exact number on it because they feel like it's going to change a lot by the time this headset comes out.
We've had companies being very bombastic about translation layers between ARM and x86 in the past with Qualcomm and Prism. It'll be interesting to see how that actually plays out when it comes through. Are you expecting to be able to use this as essentially your VR Steam Deck? Like, could you use this as your sort of like standalone gaming device?
I think the intention from Valve, I think as they said multiple times, is they want to just give people ways to play their games wherever they want to play their games. When you had the Valve Index, you had to kind of go, I want to play on the Valve Index. I want to play a VR game, so I'm going to set up my Lighthouses base stations and I'm going to plug it in and I'm going to connect all the bits and then I'm going to jump in and play the game. With the Steam Frame, they very much want it to be, you put the Steam Frame on and then you pick which game you want to play. Because it is kind of a PC in itself, but also it's an accessory for your PC that allows you to play VR games, but there's more to it than that. The way they would see it is streaming comes first, I guess, is that kind of, it's designed to stream games from your desktop PC or whatever it is you want to connect to a laptop, and playing those Steam VR games or non-VR games. And this was one of the things we tried out actually. I think we played Hades 2 and you're essentially just playing it in like a big cinema screen. And because of those pancake lenses and the increase in resolution, it is actually very viable to just sit there and play a 2D game in VR. But I do think the battery life being 21 watt hour, I was told that the ARM processor could use about 20 watts at max power. Yeah. So you're getting about an hour if you're running, and like if it's running full power, it's gobbling up as much power as it's allowed to. And it's going to be doing that if you're rendering a game locally. So streaming, on the other hand, could be 5 or 6 watts, I was told, which is multiple hours of game time. If you wanted to play more games on the standalone mode, is they just recommend just getting a big power bank and just putting it in your pocket and running the cable up. And at the back of the strap, there's a little USB 2.0, essentially a charging port. You can plug it in and then you can get loads more hours out of that.
It seems like they're trying to pitch this as not just a VR headset in a way, like not just for the VR crowd.
Going into the game libraries here, Steam is also going to have to kind of support more ARM games programmed for ARM, essentially. And that's a lot of the VR market now, because the Quest, a huge amount of VR developers are developing for essentially ARM-based processors. So there is actually a huge market for VR games that Steam doesn't have. And because of the Steam Frame, they are able now to support those games natively and then just play those, straight on the processor itself. Well, I was told actually during these meetings that they will be then bringing those kind of like ARM-based games essentially to Steam.
That's really interesting. So you got like the Quest 3 as this sort of like development target for a lot of VR developers, and to sort of like expand the audience of the Frame, then Valve is bringing that through to Steam as well.
Yeah, they didn't mention it to me, but I just get the impression that they realize that the market has changed a bit in terms of VR, that Steam is not the de facto platform of choice for VR developers at this point. The market is, if you look at the Steam hardware survey, I mean, I have the numbers here actually, and this is just people playing on Steam, so actually this is slightly skewed towards Valve's own headset. So Quest 3 is 26.68%. This was for September. Quest 2 is 26.17%. The Valve Index was 13.47%. And I think the Valve Index weirdly has gone up to somewhere at 14% this month. And the Quest 3S is 7.87%. So realistically, even on Valve's own platform, Quest headsets are dominant. And actually, a lot of people that own Quest are probably not plugging into a PC and running Steam anyway, because they're probably just using Meta Horizon OS and playing their games there. There will be a compatibility system like the Steam Deck compatibility one for the ARM.
Oh, right. So there'll be sort of like some visual indicators of what works.
Yeah, well, what's been tested to work. And probably like the Deck, you can try it as well and just see.
The Quest 3 is sort of like this tiny line. We're talking about Quest 3 a lot, but like it's obvious that Valve has seen that as sort of like part of their target, and I think you can see that in the controllers as well. Why don't we talk a little bit about the controllers, because they're not the same as the Index. Very much look much more like the Quest controllers.
Yeah, I mean, my first impression of these is exactly the Quest PS3 controller. But they look pretty much the same. Gone is the kind of outer bit of the Valve Index controller that used to do some of the finger sensing, but they still do the finger sensing. It's got capacitive finger sensing, so you got the thumbsticks and all the buttons and kind of the grip, and so you can still do all of the finger movements that kind of people wanted for the Valve Index. You got dexterity in your digits, basically. You got haptic feedback, and you get replaceable AA battery for 40-hour battery life. Though the main thing is what Valve describes as input parity with a traditional gamepad. They're two separate controllers, but if you were to hold them near each other, it's basically a gamepad.
It would feel like you were holding a gamepad.
So you can hold them separately and you can play it. So if you're playing a 2D game that supports a gamepad, Steam input pops up, which, you can map it. It should just work as normal because it is basically a gamepad, but it's also a VR controller. Last few things, you've got 16 gigabytes of RAM on the Steam frame. It does support Wi-Fi 7, although, like say, you're using 6 gigahertz kind of streaming, and you actually have 5 gigahertz separately to connect to your own Wi-Fi. So it's doing the game streaming separately to having Wi-Fi. It comes in two different storage options. You've got 256 gigabyte and 1 terabyte. There's a micro SD card slot on the headset. It's SDXC, so it supports up to 2 terabyte. The faceplate actually has a separate proprietary it's a Gen 4 PCIe connection on the front. I think the connector itself may be proprietary, but don't quote me on that. That's for modding or adding accessories or upgrading.
The elephant in the room is pricing and release date. Like, we know it's going to be sort of like next year for the release date, but what are we thinking in price?
It's got to be somewhere near the Quest 3 in terms of price. It can't be an index price. If it's $999.
There's a potential that if we've got these two storage options, you could have one below the Quest 3.
Yeah, you could sandwich
one
it
above the Quest 3.
Yeah. So Steam machines, they're coming back.
It almost feels like an inevitability. Like, obviously, we've had hints of Valve wanting to do a living room console again, and given the success of the Steam Deck, I think it makes total sense, and it's not a huge surprise to see this. But obviously, given Valve's history with the original Steam machines back in 2012 when they were announced, 2014 when they were announced again, and 2015 when they were eventually released without SteamOS, it's been a rocky road on that side of things.
So it is a box. I think it's basically nearly a cube. It does have a small light bar along the front, and that is basically the only thing that makes it shine out. It's smaller than it looks in pictures. The CPU is an AMD 6-core Zen 4 chip, the kind of equivalent of a Ryzen 7000 series, kind of a 7600, I would assume. Though we don't have too many details about clock speeds and whatnot for that, so maybe it's a lower end one equivalent. The GPU, a semi-custom AMD RDNA 3 28CU GPU.
They told you that was like a 7600 family.
They specifically mentioned it's a 7600 family, which actually doesn't align with the desktop card.
So that makes it more like the 7600S or the 7600M of the mobile parts, which is a 28CU. It's interesting because those were the ones that went into a lot of external GPUs that were out for the handhelds for things like 1X Player. They're doing ones with the 7600 in them, I think those were 28CU ones.
Kind of going along with that, it's 8 gigabytes of RAM, VRAM for the GPU, but on the memory side for the CPU, it's 16 gigabytes of DDR5, but that's SODIMM. So that kind of also suggests, I mean, you could put SODIMM on anything, but it is sort of a laptop kind of form factor. It's a smaller form factor than what you get on a desktop. That is removable, but it is hidden under a heatsink. So I'll quickly describe just the way that the Steam machine is put together. So at the bottom, you've got a power supply, which I believe is 200 watts.
So is the power supply external or internal?
Internal.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an internal. It makes up most of the chassis, the frame for the Steam machine.
That's interesting.
So you've got this 200 watt power supply on the bottom. Then you've got the kind of PCBs for the actual motherboard, which has got the chips, they've got the discrete GPU, you've got the memory, you've got everything, you've got those SODIMM slots. Then on top of that, you've got a single, they're quite large heatsink. That's stuck on top with various heat pads and different thermal solutions, as they were telling me, to keep everything cool. And then you have one 120mm fan that blows in from the side and then kind of out the front. They wanted to go for one 120mm fan to keep the noise down essentially, but also they just found it was quite effective to have this one fairly large fan. I mean, it's not large by desktop standards, but
by mini PC standards, that's quite a...
It's fairly big. It's apparently it's a custom or semi-custom fan as well, like it's made to order basically for them. At the bottom, there is an M.2 slot. It's 2230 as standard, and they will be offering 512GB and 2TB models, but you can replace that SSD with a 2280 or another 2230.
Okay.
So it will support a larger SSD as well on the bottom, and that's easily accessible. You don't have to remove a heatsink or do anything with, thermal paste. So you're all good. And there's also a micro SD card slot, and like I said before, you could swap it from Steam Frame, Steam Deck, Steam Machine.
I think the interesting thing here is we're talking about a mini PC with a discrete GPU in it, and I think that's the really key thing here. We're not talking about an integrated GPU in there. We're not talking about something like a Strix Point AMD chip in there. This is a proper dedicated GPU with its own dedicated VRAM on there. What sort of performance are we looking at in terms of?
They're saying it's going to be 6 times more performance than a Steam Deck, which is moderate. I mean, I played Cyberpunk on it at 4K, but had to use FSR upscaling to get there.
Yeah.
And it ran fine, and at 1080p, it actually just with no upscaling, because I dropped it down to that in the settings, and it ran pretty fluid on that as well. I didn't have an exact FPS monitor on there, but yeah, it played pretty well.
Just as a little living room console, like playing native games on your TV.
I think that's their intention is, whether you have another PC or not, this is about having it in your living room, having that accessible, using the Steam controller with it, which we'll get to, and just being able to jump in. Your saves are already in the Steam system and carried over. So everything's just kind of plug and play. And we should have mentioned this with the Steam Frame, but the Steam Frame and the Steam Machine both have the kind of fast turn on and off. So you can jump back into a game. If you turn off the system, and while you're playing a game, it just kind of freezes it there. And then you jump back in, turn it back on, it pops straight back up, and it's really quick to jump between those states. So I'll quickly go through the I/O. You've got DisplayPort 1.4 at HDMI 2.0. There's a 1 gigabit per second Ethernet. There's USB-C 10 gigabits per second, so that's 3.2 Gen 2. And there are 4 USB Type A ports. There's 2 USB 3 in the front, and then there's 2 USB 2 in the rear. And there's a Wi-Fi 6E antenna, but there's also a dedicated Bluetooth antenna, and there's an integrated Steam controller antenna, so that if you have up to 4 Steam controllers, I think it is, you can play without actually using up the Bluetooth, essentially using the Bluetooth antenna. It's got its dedicated one for that, so you get 2.4 gigahertz direct, as if you had the puck, which we'll get to soon.
Yeah.
Also, by having the Bluetooth separate to the Wi-Fi, they say that you can do all the Bluetooth stuff, have all the controllers connected in your living room, and still have a Wi-Fi connection downloading games without being interfered with by kind of sharing that bandwidth. Of course, I think the main thing here is it runs SteamOS. It's running the same operating system the Steam Frame and the Steam Deck are running. And yeah, it's Linux, but it's using Proton that we've seen to great success on Steam Deck, just running Windows games.
So SteamOS on a desktop PC, eh?
Yeah.
With a discrete GPU. What a world. Do you think we're actually going to see SteamOS getting released for other people to make Steam machines?
So I don't know about that, but when I kind of asked them about whether they expect, I mean, with the Steam Deck, we saw a sudden influx of people going, we'll make a high-end Steam Deck. And a lot of them were Windows powered because SteamOS wasn't really ready. We now have Lenovo making a SteamOS handheld, and it's actually really good and it runs great. It's great. Performs better than the Windows One equivalent, so that's great. And so with this, they are hoping, well, they're making a product and they were keen to say, we're making a product and we're selling that product and we're backing that. But if people want to take this and take the ISO and then put it on something else, they can totally create a Steam machine of their own. They could do their own, or a company could make their own and put SteamOS on it.
We're not going to support it, but you can do it. Obviously with this, we've got an AMD CPU and an AMD GPU. So you would think from that ISO, that desktop ISO, you've got support for a desktop AMD chip and a desktop AMD GPU. I guess that's going to be different trying to get NVIDIA.
Yeah, so they were saying they've been developing this AMD driver themselves for the graphics side, and they've been pushing through. Obviously in Linux it's all open, but they've been trying to push that through and get it to a spot where they're happy with it. Now they're happy with it and it works and they can support this stuff. Whereas on the NVIDIA and Intel side, they said they're working on this stuff and trying to get it through. It's just a bit slower going. So it's not really ready yet. They haven't got NVIDIA and Intel GPU support kind of up to the kind of same standard as AMD. So really, if you want to do one of these, you need to do a little all AMD mini PC or not mini PC. They actually said to me, if you want to put a 9070 XT and like a 9950 X3D into a machine, slap SteamOS on it and call it Steam Machine, like go for it. But again, we have no price.
It's got to be cheap. Like I think this is the thing for this. It's like it's a relatively low end GPU. It's got to be relatively cheap. You think about the Steam Deck pricing that's the biggest sell, and that's the thing that keeps it relevant even today. So many years after it was released, it's the thing that keeps the Steam Deck relevant compared to the competition. But then I guess if you look at the mini PC market with discrete GPUs, they're not cheap. So like there is a certain amount of leeway here for Valve to price this box. Given they've gone for last gen hardware, like I think the value play has to be there.
They are planning to ship it in a bundle with a Steam controller as well, and they will sell it standalone. But yeah, 512GB model and 2TB model. So I think 512 kind of with the intention that maybe you put an SD card in there.
Yeah.
And then the 2TB is probably what you really want, because games be big, man.
The Steam Machine feels so obvious after the Steam Deck, and the Steam Deck has sort of like created, like you were saying, like the Steam Deck has created the opportunity for Valve to go further with the Steam frame. It's giving the opportunity to make a Steam machine that is now viable without having to go to third parties. And then I guess from that, the inevitable thing is the Steam controller too.
It's not called the Steam Controller 2.
It's the Steam Controller.
It's just called the Steam Controller, not to be confused with the Steam Controller,
which I loved.
Which you are not a huge fan of. You didn't like it because it takes a while to get used to the original Steam Controller. It has two, trackpads that act as kind of the mice and moving stuff around.
The idea and the ethos behind the original Steam Controller makes 100% sense. It's a PC controller for sitting on your sofa, playing on your TV, PC games that are predominantly mouse-based. I think that's a laudable
But you have
thing.
one there, do you not?
Yeah,
Shall we bring it in? This is the original.
This is the original Steam controller.
But brand new, still, in box, because that's how much we loved using them. They were £4 in the UK for a while. But obviously, the key thing here is you've got those two. This is for people that don't really know it, which actually turns out is quite a lot of people we've been speaking to. But you don't have the other alternative thumbstick in a normal
so you've got
analog.
just the single thumbstick on there. Like it was kind of forcing you to use those pads. And what I like about what I've seen from the new Steam controller is that it's not forcing you down that route.
Yeah, so this is the thing. The ethos, like you're saying, is a good idea behind that controller, because it allows you to interact with your whatever device it is. If you're in a living room and you're playing in big picture mode, it allows you to interact with your TV as if you're using a keyboard and mouse, but obviously you're not. You're sat using on your sofa using a controller, and that is more convenient. So that ethos is the same, but I think they've realized that what people want is kind of both a controller and the Steam controller in one thing. So normal thumbsticks as a normal, you could use it as a normal controller, but it also has two little touchpads kind of lower, which you can use essentially in the same way as the Steam controller.
The same way as the Steam Deck. If you look at the same square touchpads that you've got on the Steam Deck itself.
And that's exactly what they were going for, is parity with the Steam Deck. One of the things that they were talking about as the reasons behind the new Steam controller was people were docking their Steam Deck and using it like, their everyday PC, and then also using it for gaming. But while it's docked, they actually lose functionality because you don't have access to all the same buttons. And the new Steam controller has all those same buttons. It's got capacitive touch sticks, it's got those trackpads, and it actually has new functionality, which apparently is one engineer in Valve is a huge fan of the gyro control in games, which quite a lot of the engineers are like, I've never even touched on this, but this person loved it so much they were like, we have to do this in this controller. And so they've got gyro controls as well, which has a grip sensor in the back of it might be on both sides, but definitely on the right hand side of the controller, but while you're gripping it and you're in gyro mode, you can control like a mouse by kind of moving the controller around. It comes with a puck, and the puck supports up to 4 controllers per puck. That's a dedicated 2.4 gigahertz connection. On the Steam machine, it will just connect without the puck. You can connect up to 4 controllers to that anyway.
Nice.
And they reckon it's got a 35-hour playtime as well. And you just charge it with... So the puck itself has these little connectors on the back.
Right, so you just rest it on top.
You just rest it, and it kind of like attaches on, charges, and then you pull it off, and it's good. Or you can just plug in USB Type-C in the back, and it charges away. I think the play is they're creating a Valve ecosystem here. A Steam ecosystem between the Steam Deck, which was... they see that as very successful and the foundation for a lot of this stuff. And then you've got the Steam frame, and then you've also got the Steam controller, which plays with all of these things, and the Steam machine. And all of them are connected, all of them work in a similar way, all of them use the same operating system, all of them allow developers some, allow the gamers some flexibility that developers don't really have to do anything to, to benefit from.
I didn't think we were expecting to have like that level of ecosystem coming out from when you heading off to Valve. So it's a really interesting set of things to come back from. What is the thing that you're most excited about though?
Steam Frame for me, I think because I'm a fan of VR, I like a new VR headset to tinker with a lot, and the Steam Frame is exciting. I think the wireless play, and I'm really keen, if that actually has quite a few hours of battery life wireless, and it streams perfectly with this foveated streaming, that sounds just like an absolute dream scenario for just picking up and playing VR. It's
that pick up and play stuff that I struggle with VR. Like even the Quest 2, which is so much more user-friendly than something like the Index, where you've got to set up base stations and things. You've still got to really put some work in to get that set up every time you pick it up. So something that is just like there, strap it on and you're good to go. Like that feels like a good thing for VR.
We don't know pricing yet. I'm sure that'll either come out a little bit before the release date or kind of around the same time.
Thanks for doing that. Thanks for heading out to Valve. I know that was a hardship. That's everything about the new devices. We'll have more coming over the next couple of months, I'm sure, and going into 26 when the things actually come out and we get to test them properly in depth.
Thanks for watching.
Check back for more content on PCGamer.com, and see you soon. Cheers.
Bye.